knowing what you want in a partner is going to be your best bet, because I think oftentimes when we're in relationships, we compare the current partner to past relationships, and that doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us to the present day, because those past relationships didn't work out for a reason. So why are we comparing something that we currently have to something that we didn't have in the past? We try to control our partners, and so that's when we create that divide of, wait, no, I need you to be this way. Love is a choice, right? It's total acceptance of this person that, okay, they're different from me and they're going to pursue different things, but I'm still at the end of the day going to choose this person because our values align, because I really like doing life with them, right? Whatever those underlying motivations may be is important.
If you saw yourself, you brought up like 2022 a lot, how that such was like a transformative year for you. If you were on the other side and I'm Laura from that year, what is something that you would want to tell her?
Oh my goodness.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. As always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for showing support, and thank you guys for showing love on every single episode. We have a guest today, a reoccurring guest, Laura Caruso, the relationship expert, relationship therapist, somebody who I've been following for a while. We've known each other for a while. I just want to say thank you for coming back on again.
Thanks for having me.
It's 2 years later since our last episode.
Time flies.
We have grown in our respective industries, respective choices in social media and our own personal lives. How does it feel 2 years later to be in the same exact studio that we were then?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like no time has passed at all. I know it's been 2 years, but there's no way.
Yeah.
2 years flies by, but so many things are different, I feel like, in both of our lives, personally and professionally. So obviously the time has passed.
So as a relationship expert and somebody who's experienced a lot of relationships and experienced love, from your perception, how do you define love?
Oh, wow. We're going with the big hitter first. How do I define love? I think love is always a conscious choice. I think there's a really big difference in relationships when we choose to love our partner versus not. I think love is really being able to separate yourself and your ego and your defenses and maybe your needs from time to time to prioritize those of your partner. And I think that's the really big difference between a relationship that's full of love and a relationship that maybe isn't.
I guess in terms of love itself, what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions? We all want this thing, right? Like it's something that we all yearn for. And I think that everybody, regardless of what language you could speak, can understand love in a relationship and what that looks like. What do you think are some of the misconceptions about love itself?
I think the biggest one is that it should be easy. I think we look at relationships that feel really difficult as, this isn't the right relationship. It's not a good fit. And sometimes that's just not true, right? Sometimes life is really hard. Relationships are really hard and things get in the way. And so choosing your partner time and time again can be tricky. But people always leave relationships when they start to get difficult. And I think that's more of avoidance than anything.
It's like the self-sabotage, right? How often we do that. Ironically, I've been, in most of like the relationships that I've been in, it's been, I think, I can't speak on all, but I will say some of them have been ones where I think I've self-sabotaged and I think the other person has self-sabotaged as well. Just because we don't understand what that healthy form of love really looks like.
Yeah.
And I know that we dived in a little bit deeper on that topic of toxicity and growing up in that, but self-sabotage seems to play a bit part in that too as well. What would you say?
Yeah, and I think even the most secure people start to self-sabotage in relationships. I went into my last relationship with a totally secure attachment, it felt like. And I mean, last time we spoke, I had just moved back to the city after that 2022 breakup that just completely wrecked me. And I entered that relationship really anxious, and I left that relationship even more anxious. I did a lot of work. I traveled, I really got to know myself and what I was looking for and what my ideal partner was. So I entered my last relationship pretty confident and pretty secure. And then it broke down right in the end, a year later. And I started to get more avoidant. I was less likely to bring things up, or if I did, I started to become more critical. And that's not to say I'm a bad person or I did anything wrong by any means, but it's just proof that, emotions get the best of us. And that's why love is a choice. That's why we have to come back and choose our partners, because I shouldn't have criticized my partner. I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. But it was difficult to choose him when it was constant fighting and it was the same thing over and over again. And so I don't know. I think we just get so in our heads, and I think we really guilt and shame ourselves. But hindsight is always 20/20. We said that before we even came in. You always look back on relationships and you learn something. And I think we're supposed to grow in every single relationship.
Yeah. I think I do agree with that in terms of that aspect where we learn so much about ourselves. But it's such a weird thing because when we look back, right, like we're always constantly, for some reason, we're looking in the past, and we're never able to, I guess we can apply those lessons for our future selves, but then there's sometimes where we just ruminate in that, like, we could have done something better, or we could have done something more, or we loved that person to a certain extent. And it's just weird to see how sometimes we can stay in that place and not ever like move out, like it's an apartment or a house that we're stuck in and we can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's probably what some of your clients come to you about, is that they just can't move on, or the whole process of moving on for every relationship is different.
Yeah. I also want to challenge that belief of I should have done something more. In trauma therapy, we talk about this list of core beliefs, and I feel like this came up on the last episode too. There's like 26 of them or something around that number. And it's my bread and butter as a therapist. We all carry these core beliefs with us, and they develop across different developmental stages, right? Those early stages from like 0 to 2 are survival. We have no language. It's all completely pre-verbal. So those beliefs look something like I'm not safe or I'm discarded. And then they get older, right? We develop language. We get a little bit more complex as humans. And then they become things like, I should have done something. That's that responsibility instinct, right? You're going to see that in those people pleasers, or the people who typically fawn and prioritize other people's needs over their own. And I think those beliefs are different. Well, I know those beliefs are different from person to person. And for me, I don't ever really look back and think, oh, I should have done something. Sure, those thoughts come up. But I think what I ruminate on is like, I should have seen that. Right? It's this self-responsibility of I should have walked away. I should have known better versus I should have done something, because I think I do everything for better or for worse.
Yeah. There's right before the podcast, there was something I've learned in relationship science class that I've taken, where it's called the positive illusion, where we create this illusion, or the rose-colored glasses is I guess the pop culture term, and we don't see that. Like, we see that they are so great and this person is so different than the other people, and we kind of it's sort of a confirmation bias that, oh, this person is so much different, and when in reality the other people that see it are kind of like I don't really know, I don't know if this person's for you, but we feed into that belief and we give into that belief.
Yeah.
With the rose-colored glasses, how in the initial stages, at least with your own personal experience and observing other people's experience, can we get rid of those glasses in the beginning?
I think ask for feedback, right? Talk to your people who are closest to you and who know you best. I think in my last relationship specifically, I didn't really tell my friends when it started to break down. And so when we finally broke up, my friends were like, what are you talking about? What's going on? What happened? And I think, yes, we know what's best for ourselves ultimately, but it doesn't hurt to hear feedback from the people who really know us and who care about us. And knowing what you want in a partner is going to be your best bet, because I think oftentimes when we're in relationships, we compare the current partner to past relationships, and that doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us to the present day, because those past relationships didn't work out for a reason. So why are we comparing something that we currently have to something that we didn't have in the past? Right? Figure out who your ideal partner is. Really get clear on what it is that you're looking for in your relationship. What is your vision for the future? Who are you in that relationship? How are you showing up in that relationship? And how does that partner show up? And compare your current partner to that, right? Are you where you want to be? And it's not to say that your perfect partner is going to be 100% your ideal partner. There are areas that we're going to compromise and negotiate on, and then there are negotiables and non-negotiables. But if we're constantly comparing to the past, we're never going to be able to move forward, whereas the ideal partner is in the future.
It's always weird that, at least for me, and maybe you can also agree with this, that the ideal partner has changed over time and how that's constantly changing. I think in terms of the base characteristics we understand or we know, but in terms of like what that person sounds like or how they speak to us or all those things, it seems like it's different as we go on throughout these relationships, and we kind of understand a different part of ourselves in return of that.
Oh yeah, we learn more things.
Yeah.
Right. And our needs change as we learn more things and experience more things. And even in my last relationship, when I met him, he checked every box on that ideal partner list. And he went into the relationship having the same list. And we actually talked about that and we compared and we were laughing of, oh my gosh, did we just meet our ideal partners? And then somewhere along the line, we both became further and further away from those lists and those ideal partners, but neither of us reflected on it, right? So checking in with yourself, returning to those lists, returning to the visions, journaling, right? Meditating on it, talking to a therapist, talking to a friend about it, anything that is going to allow you to self-reflect and then check in and almost weigh your current reality with your vision for the future is going to benefit you.
And I know that's something that, from what I see, a lot of relationships and a lot of partners struggle with is growing together instead of growing apart. And that seems to be one of the main root causes for divorce, which we'll get into in a little bit later. But how can we as partners or relationships show up in ways where we don't create this disconnect and rather we kind of grow closer?
I think communication, right? We said that earlier. It's like, oh, it always comes down to communication. It really does. All you have to say to your partner is, hey, I'm thinking of exploring this in my life. How do you feel about that? How can you support me in that? How can we support each other? And constantly coming back to each other. I always tell this story of, I don't even know where I saw it at this point, probably like Facebook 10 years ago, of this guy talking about, I fell in love with 10 different women. And it was just every version of his wife that she became in her lifespan, right? When they met, 5 years later, she's a different person. 5 years after that, she's a different person. He's like, I fell in love with the yoga wife and the dancer and the cook, like the chef and the mother. And, we're never going to be the same people across the lifespan. And I think we try to control our partners. And so that's when we create that divide of, wait, no, I need you to be this way. Love is a choice, right? It's total acceptance of this person that, okay, they're different from me and they're going to pursue different things, but I'm still at the end of the day going to choose this person because our values align, because I really like doing life with them, right? Whatever those underlying motivations may be is important.
And I think that's the biggest, one of the biggest things. There was a point that I was going to go to earlier, and you just reminded me of it, that we as people or society believe that love is this feeling that we get, the butterflies or all of these things. We've been
anxiety.
Yeah. We've been told that this is what love should feel like, or that it's going to feel ooey gooey all the time. That you might go out, you might be living with your partner and you might see them just laying on the couch and be like, who the is this person?
Always.
Right? Yeah. But we've been misleaded in this such, we've been leaded by this perspective that love is always a feeling, and it's not. It comes down to a choice, but this feeling that we feel should be there forever, but no. It's never going to be. And I think that, like you said, the versions of those people that we meet and we encounter, either number one, it's a lack of acceptance in terms of that partner, that we don't like or don't accept who they are now, or that they have changed so much that we don't even know this person anymore because we haven't gotten to know them.
And that's a choice.
Yeah.
Right. We choose not to get to know this new version. I think some of the feelings that we're trying to describe and label as love are things like care and affection and appreciation, right? Let's take a relationship out of the context. Let's talk about my dog. I love my dog, but what does that mean? I really appreciate having my dog around. I really value who she is as a living being, right? She has a personality all of her own, and I love her to death. But loving her is the choice, right? It's all of the choice in response to all of the feelings that are underneath. And that's why we need to be taught the correct things. And it's not to say that it's correct forever, right? That our understanding of it is going to change as well. But I think the more people start to talk about relationships and start to talk about dynamics, expectations raise, which is good, right? And like the way we interact with people changes too.
Do you think that we have either like a lack of standards or a lack of expectations going into those early phases or going into those relationships that can undermine the partner, undermine yourself?
I think it's changing.
Yeah.
I really do. And I'm going to shit on men for a second. So I'm really sorry. I'm not saying that this is every male experience, right? I know you. I know you're a good man and I know what you want in your relationships. There are a lot of men out there who are doing the absolute bare minimum in relationships and even like maintaining a household. I saw a reel yesterday. A therapist actually completely deconstructed this reel, but he came from a good place. He was well-intentioned and he was talking about, take this load off of your wife and this is what you can do. And it was things like put your dishes in the dishwasher after you eat. Take out the trash. If you put trash in it and you notice that it's full, pick up your clothes and put them in the hamper instead of dropping them next to the hamper. And the therapist just totally deconstructed what he said and was like, okay, well-intentioned, great, but you're just cleaning up after yourself. You're not actually taking any load off of your wife. She shouldn't be doing those things. They're your things to do. And so I think in relationships, right, we're operating from this social norm and this gender norm that is just completely unconscious at times of like the woman in the relationship is going to do everything. They're going to manage all of the emotions and the mental load and a lot of the physical loads. And then the men are going to be the providers, which is amazing. And that works for some people, but it doesn't work for all people. And it doesn't work in a household where two people are working. Who has time to do anything after work? I don't even want to cook a meal after work. But I think people are talking about that. And so you'll see articles like The Rise in Single Men, which was written by a military vet, and it was published on Psychology Today. And right, that's like the idea of masculinity in our society of like, here's a military man, here's a strong man. And he titled it The Rise of Single Men and talked about how women are raising their standards and men are being asked to raise their behavior, right? They're trying to meet those expectations. And so now when you look at data, you see more single men than you see single women. And you see people starting to marry later, right? And make different choices. So I think the narrative is changing. I think behavior takes a little while to catch up after we start to change the narrative around it, but it is changing. And I think relationships are improving.
Yeah. I thank you for that comment, but I will say that in this department, I'm glad that you brought this up because I wanted to get into this for my personal self and kind of think out loud with you, but I've struggled with that dynamic, not more or less where I'm like a little boy and you need to take care of me, but I think that I fall short on the emotional aspect. I think sometimes I'm so caught up in this or I'm so caught up, my mind is elsewhere and it's very hard for me to be present.
Yeah.
And I think that I fall short in terms of the whole masculinity thing where I'm trying to like understand what that looks like, right? Like I had a conversation with my mom the other day and she's played both of those roles.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for her to teach me how to be a man or court a woman in the correct manner because my father was supposed to do that. Yep. So I think that that's where I fall short and I'm starting to learn what that looks like. But I guess I'm not excusing men's behavior because I don't think it's right at all, but I'm looking at it from a lens that I sometimes don't understand what does that look like, right? Like, what does it look like to provide? What does it look like to support? What does it look like to put a woman in her femininity? Like, what does that look like, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm accountable enough to know that I don't know enough to what that looks like, which is why I've struggled in relationships and struggled in long-term relationships. Partially I feel like it's due to that elongated period where they may see like, oh, he's not as masculine as I thought, or he doesn't know how to court me in the correct manner. So I look at it from that perspective where for us, it's not something that we understand or will ever understand.
Yeah.
And we're trying to empathize and be compassionate towards, at least I am, and I'm trying to understand it. So I'm happy that you brought that up, because I, like, for a while, when the relationships ended, I've always looked at it as like, damn, I could have been better in that aspect.
It's so interesting, too, that you connect that back to the core belief, because I so see that pathway now for men to walk away from a relationship and say, like, oh, I should have done better, or I should have done something, I should have done more, because I can see that responsibility instinct, because a lot of times relationships do end because of that dynamic. And I love working with men. I work with a lot of men in therapy, and they're my best clients because they learn so much, right? And I pull up a feelings wheel and I'm like, have you ever seen these words before? And they're like, no. There's the inner core, right? It's like happy, sad, scared. They're like, I know those words. I'm like, yeah, of course, because we don't use the other fucking words in our language, right? We don't use those when we talk to people. And so we talk about what are emotions, right? And then how do you label them? How do you feel them in your body? And then how do you communicate them to your partner? I think the best thing a man can do in a relationship, if you're working on this and you don't know what to do, say, I don't know what to do. Say, something's happening for me right now and I need your help. Can we, like, talk about it? Can we process it? Right? We're not expecting anyone to just get it right 100% of the time. We're just expecting someone to loop us into it. That's part of being present and sharing that emotional experience.
Yeah. It's funny. It's hilarious that you say that, because in hindsight, I would come from a perspective that I knew I had it figured out. Or I guess when people see the podcast, they see or they claim to me that I have emotional intelligence. I think that's where I tell them I fall short, is because I can't tell you what's going on.
I can't. I'm a therapist.
Yeah, I
People
can't tell
look
you
at
what's
me
going
and they're
on.
like, oh, she's really good at relationships.
Yeah.
No, we're humans.
Right.
We're humans.
I guess it's the identification of it, where we don't know how to process or express those emotions. And then I can say in my life where I expressed those emotions and then I was ostracized for it, because I explained what I'm feeling, but now I'm coming off as more of a feminine man because I'm telling you what this is. But
that's the wrong partner.
Yeah.
That's not you. That's the wrong partner.
Maybe I've gaslit myself into believing that there was something wrong with me in that front.
There is nothing more masculine than sharing your emotions. And I just started dating someone, and if this turns into a relationship, he's going to kill me for saying this on the podcast. So remind me to not send it to him. He's working through talking about his feelings, and he is a really emotionally intelligent man, right? He's the most emotionally intelligent man I've ever dated. And we were talking about anxiety last weekend, and he was like, yeah, I was really going through it today. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? You should tell me these things. We can talk about it. And then 5 minutes go by, and we're just like laying on the couch in silence. And he goes, do you ever just feel like life is just passing you by? And I'm like, beautiful. This is a great conversation. Let's talk about it. Right? That's putting the vulnerability out there. That's noticing. I said, can you loop me into your emotional experience? And then he took that risk, and he was vulnerable, and he just came out with one of his deepest rooted fears. That is what a healthy relationship is, being able to hold those emotions, receive them, and then talk about them. I didn't sit there and say, no, your life isn't passing you by. That's his experience. Who am I to say that his life isn't passing him by? Right? I said, wow, that's probably really scary. I can imagine that. I don't feel that way, but I can imagine that I might feel that way someday.
Do you think that it's because not just I would say men here, but in general, that when we offer that risk and it's not accepted, that we shut everything off? Like, we're like, all right, well, I can't do that anymore. Do you think that once that happens in a relationship, it's more or less destined for a person not to want to share any more feelings or emotions?
I think it reinforces that pattern. And I think this is where men are at a huge disadvantage. They're taught that from such a young age, right? Big boys don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. And so men from little boys are taught, don't feel your feelings, and not only don't feel them, don't communicate them. And that's a lot of the work that I do in therapy with men, is breaking down that stigma and breaking down those messages that they've internalized about emotions, and then learning how to bring them into your relationship in a constructive way. Because a lot of times when men try to make that jump of like, okay, I know that I'm supposed to share my emotions, but I don't know how, they come out aggressive or abrasive. And it's not because they're not trying. It's because, men normalize anger, and that's really hard.
Yeah.
And it's important to have that space to talk about it.
I've been watching The Sopranos lately and watch Tony Soprano.
My fave.
Watching Tony Soprano talk about it. It's to the world the most masculine man, but then behind closed doors, he's dealing with all of these things.
I would argue as a therapist too. You know, I talk about The Sopranos all the time. I wrote a paper about Tony Soprano in therapy for my grad program. And I would argue that behind closed doors, he was more masculine.
Really?
Right? Because he was vulnerable. What is masculinity? Taking risks, being vulnerable, showing up, supporting, providing. The toxic masculinity is where we brand it as like strength and bravery. And, you know, I think it's more brave to say, I'm feeling really scared than punching someone in the face. It's easy to punch someone in the face. You just punch them.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to put yourself out there and say, I'm really scared, and then not know what's going to happen next. You know, if you punch someone in the face, they're punching you back. You know what that path is. But if you say, I'm scared, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to be received.
Yeah. Do you think that we are more of an emotional, distant society now than we were in the previous years?
Yeah. I think, I'll take that back. I don't know if we're as emotionally distant. I think we're trying to talk about the emotion.
So we are back. Cameras fucking hate you, but we're going to get through it. So I think divorce is something that's present a lot in today's society, but more importantly, it's America that seems to be dealing with the issues of divorce. How, as a relationship therapist, have you been able to combat the divorce rate, which is at like 40-50% in America?
It's actually down. It
Really?
was up way higher. Yeah. Divorce rates are much lower in our generation than they were for our parents' generation. And it's interesting if you look at like the socio-political context of that. Our parents, divorce was unheard of. Like, you did not get divorced. You stuck it out, even if it was unhappy and loveless. Maybe you had affairs and you just didn't talk about it. Our parents' generation, that was the first generation really where it was like, okay, you can divorce and like, you're not going to be socially isolated or ostracized because of it. So you saw really high divorce rates. And then now with our generation, a lot of us grew up with divorced parents and we're like, we're never doing that. So we're actually waiting to get married and divorcing less. But in terms of working through divorce, you know, I always talk about, what is your choice, right? What kind of future do you want for yourself? And does it align with your relationship? And can you get your relationship to that point? Just because it doesn't currently align doesn't mean that it's doomed. It doesn't mean that you need to end it, but it does mean that you need to figure it out.
How do we know when a relationship's done? Like, how, I think people struggle with, they stay in a relationship and they know that it's not for them anymore. I've definitely been in that, where I've stayed in a relationship and I knew it was done. How, as partners, can we know when this is just no longer for us anymore?
When you're no longer motivated to work on it. Short and sweet.
Yeah.
And not motivated, right? It's a lot deeper than just, I don't want to do this, or I'm so tired of doing this. Unmotivated means you are literally not putting in the effort and you have no desire to put in the effort.
But then some people stay in that and then creates further resentment.
Yep.
Interesting.
It's harder to leave, right?
Yeah.
It's harder to uproot your life than it is to just tolerate what's already happening.
Well, it's familiar as well. Going out into the unknown and being single is something that we have no control over. Or
Scary.
Yeah. That's interesting because I guess from a lens that I'd like to look at is, do you believe that a relationship ends when the emotional connection is done?
No. I mean, maybe if you're avoided and you just break up, sure. But every relationship loses emotion, right? You're never going to have a spark 24/7. You're never going to be attracted to your partner 24/7. You're never even really going to love and choose to love your partner 24/7, because that's part of the human experience. And that's why love is the choice. Can you come back to your partner? Can you choose to repair the relationship even when it feels like there's nothing left, right?
Is there a way that we can kind of like navigate certain differences that we have in terms of emotional needs?
Yeah, give me a difference. I'll give you an explanation.
Somebody that I guess let's use the anxious avoidant, since that's such a prevalent and such a present thing in today's society.
Oh, yeah. So let's say you have one partner who's anxious, one partner who's avoidant. Usually the woman's anxious, the male's avoidant. Sorry, guys. Let's figure it out, right? If a woman comes to you, your girlfriend, your wife comes to you and is super anxious, maybe she's going to cling a bit more. Maybe she's going to need you to communicate more frequently. Maybe she's going to stalk your location when she has it on her phone. She's going to need a lot more from you in terms of communication and presence. Usually, though, communication soothes a lot of that. It's not necessarily the clear communication that an anxious person's looking for, it's frequency of communication. And so if that anxiety is left unresolved, there's no amount of communication in the world that you can give to soothe that anxiety unless they're aware of that anxiety. The avoidant partner, though, it becomes this push and pull of the anxious partner clings and wants more, and the avoidant partner needs more space and more time. And so they get further and further away. And you're able to work through them, but both partners have to be aware of their patterns. Both partners have to be willing to acknowledge those patterns and then figure out compromise. We don't want to take an avoidant partner and make them confront all the issues in the relationship right here and right now, even though that's what the anxious partner wants, right? Meeting in the middle might be, okay, this is the pattern coming up. We're about to fight. Instead of letting it escalate, let's take some time apart. Maybe let's sleep on it and then we'll talk about it tomorrow, right? It's setting this timeline so that the avoidant partner has an opportunity to really process and gather their thoughts and their emotions, because that's often what the avoidant partners just want. They want to understand what they're feeling and experiencing before they talk to their partner about it.
Yeah, because they get slandered, man.
They
Oh my
do. The
God, they
avoidants
get
really
slandered.
do.
Like they're they're humans.
I will say I post a lot of avoidant attachment memes, and the avoidants show up in the comments and they're absolutely devastated to see those memes, because they're like, we're always dragged. And it's true. But I think in a way, and this is controversial, I think avoidant partners are really hard to be with, because you can't run away from the problems. You literally just can't do that.
Now it's making me rethink, was I avoidant in certain things? Because I've avoided in relationships when there was this self-fulfilling prophecy that once a relationship hit a certain point, that I knew that it was going to be over. Right? Like that's when all of them ended. They had this point and I looked at it from this lens and I'm like, oh, well, I mean, it's coming up anytime now. So I've avoided conflict. I've avoided uncomfortable conversations because I was not trying to have the relationship end. And I later realized that is more doing harm than it will ever do good. Like it might be the thing that saves the relationship because you're having these uncomfortable conversations. But I leaned away from it because I didn't want to destroy the relationship.
Yeah, I would argue that's almost the anxious avoidant pull within yourself. It's like, I don't want this relationship to end. I want to hold on to it. And so as a result, I'm going to avoid bringing up difficult things so that I don't lose that relationship. In my long-term relationship that ended 2022, right before I met you, he was super avoidant in the end, and it was really difficult. And, I stayed in that relationship a year longer than I should have. And I knew that it was something that I talked to my therapist about weekly. But there's also a time and a place for a relationship to end. I was in grad school. I was finishing school. I was not really making a ton of money. I had a speech private practice. I was making just enough money to cover my rent. I knew that if we broke up, I had to leave New York City, and I wasn't ready to do that. And so I would talk to my therapist week after week for a year saying, I'm not ready to end this relationship, because if I do, my whole world changes and I don't have time or capacity for my world to change right now. And so does that make me avoidant? Not really, because I was confronting it with my therapist, right? But there's no good time or place for a relationship to end sometimes.
Yeah. Why do we avoid those uncomfortable conversations though? Like if you could give me why I would avoid it, why I chose to avoid it, obviously, but I told you a little bit, like why would you say that we avoid those conversations that we know we probably should have?
Well, if you think about the relationship ending, what does that mean for you? What's scary?
Abandonment. Feeling like I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm reinforcing my parents' relationship. There's a multitude of things.
That's what you're avoiding,
Yeah.
all that,
Yeah.
right? You're not avoiding the end of a relationship. You're avoiding bringing up all of those thoughts and beliefs about yourself and this belief that you're repeating a pattern from your family system.
Hmm. I guess there's also something deeper that I identified that I guess I'd like to think about with you is that I've thought about my parents are getting older by the day, and I don't want to repeat a pattern where I never met my grandparents, and I don't want my children to not meet their grandparents. And I think for me, I want them to know who their grandmother was and their grandfather was. I don't want them to, like me, I never met any of them. And
Because they died or
yeah,
because of other
they passed
reasons?
away.
Okay.
Yeah. All of them passed away before I was either like one or two, but
Okay.
there's a deeper feeling or deeper longing for love now because I'm not saying I'm going to have kids in like 2, 3 years or by any of that matter, but having that connection between the wife and my parents and being able for hopefully my kids to see my parents and have and know what grandpa and grandma look like and know what they sound like. So I guess there's also that fear of like, will I be able to abide by that by the time that they're still alive, knowing that they're getting into their 70s now.
Why does that feel so important to you?
Ooh.
Because it's a great goal, right? But is it enough to rush into a relationship and rush into that family system and potentially risk repeating those patterns, right? There's
Yeah.
no guarantee that you will meet that ideal partner before the time comes.
Mm. I think it's important for me because I never lived or never got to experience them. And I've heard so many great things about my grandfather, and I never got to experience them.
So are you healing yourself or are you giving your child an opportunity? A little bit of both,
Yeah, a
but
little
I
bit of
think it
both.
might lean a little more 80-20.
Yeah. You think it's 80 towards my own?
Yeah.
Hmm. I've been wondering about that lately. And I guess that does sound about right, that it is my own selfish like desire, I guess. But then I've also expressed to my mom that I want to be able to shoot a podcast with her. And it may never get released, but they know who she is. Like they know who she is, what it sounds like, um, who she is as a person. So if that time does come, then she can be able to, they could be able to know who she was.
I love that. I've heard so many stories lately of people like sitting down with their parents and just recording conversations and having like the parents talk about family memories and family stories, that everyone like gets around the table and tells, and putting it on video for future generations to see. And I love that because I think it preserves a part of the family lineage that's often lost.
Yeah. And I guess it's also too like I don't know. I mean, I guess it's important that they know who they are, like what like what was grandma like, what was grandpa like even if they don't get to meet them. I think it's important that they know who, for me at least, who they were, and because they're important to me. So I think it's that it might not be as important to them, but I think it's a good experience that they could be able to see.
Yeah. I think that's what proves that it's more 80-20 because
Yeah.
they can still have that relationship even if your parents are no longer living, right? That relationship lives on through you and through your stories and through how you communicate about your parents in your future family.
So as we did get into the anxious avoidant, how can both of those self-soothe and kind of come to a place of security?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people I know definitely, like, if it's not on the YouTube content, I know a lot of people on TikTok would definitely want to know how can the anxious and avoidant kind of self-soothe within one another.
Yeah, the anxious attachment needs some sort of stability. They need something to hold on to. So whether that's reassurance or frequent communication through check-ins, whether that's a set time of okay, we're going to come back to the conversation after 24 hours. Um, the anxious attachments just want to know that their partner's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
The avoidant, on the other side, wants space. They want time. They want space to process, to feel, to understand, to explore. And so it's okay to take that space, but you need to compromise with your anxious partner of, let's set a timeline, let's come back to it. And then maybe if I'm avoidant and I'm not actually processing my emotions, how can I do that? Does it mean I'm going to meditate? Does it mean I'm going to journal? Does it mean I'm going to schedule a session with a therapist, right? To figure out where am I in time and space, and how can I bring myself back to the present moment, and learning those self-regulation techniques.
It seems that also therapy is very much of something that is used nowadays, but I think that there's also a certain portion of us. Do you believe everybody needs therapy, or do you believe that it's only a select few of individuals that should be?
Personally, I think everyone should have therapy, but we won't even get into all the systemic issues that prevent people from having therapy. I think we'd live in a much kinder and more empathetic society if we all were forced to turn inwards a little bit. But it's not for everyone, and I get that. But I might even challenge that and ask, why is it not for you, right? What's preventing you from talking to another person about your feelings and about your experiences? Because I think the people who say it's not for me and they're very firm on not wanting therapy, I think those are probably the people who need it most. The ones who just genuinely don't like therapy are usually doing something else, right? Maybe they're journaling, maybe they're meditating, maybe they're reading self-help books. But some form of introspection or space to just process is so important, because we get to the deeper layers the more that we communicate. Even journaling, I'll find that I start writing about something and another thing completely different comes up. And I wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't have a space to put all those thoughts.
Yeah. You spoke, humanity is something that is on my mind often. And I've asked somebody, what do I believe, what do they believe is wrong with humanity? Where do you feel like we are succeeding in humanity right now?
Love this. I didn't come on here with the intention of promoting my book, but I am writing a book about this exact topic titled The Empathy Deficit. And it literally explains that society has become so polarized, understandably, as a result of just so many different socio-political dynamics in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And it's pushing us further and further away from each other. And that's creating this lack of empathy. We can't communicate, we can't connect with other people anymore because there's no empathy. Right? I don't want to understand your perspective. I don't have time to understand your perspective. That's a lack of empathy, right? You don't have to agree with someone, but you do have to understand and respect them. Maybe you don't have to understand, but you do have to try to respect them. That's what basic human decency is.
Yeah. Lack empathy. Oh man, that's a good one.
Think about when we lack empathy, though, when we're in that fight or flight response.
Yeah, the uncomfort.
Self-defense.
Yeah, the uncomfort. That's exactly when we lack the empathy, because we're so defended by the ego that we can't see that person's point of view because we want to be right inevitably.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be an incredible book.
I'm excited.
Empathy is
quite a time to write the book too.
Yeah, right. right around this time of the world. I definitely do see that, though. I definitely do see. I also think that we've, as a society, we've grown. I want to say, like, emotionally and like psychologically, right?
For
sure. How many people are now speaking about certain things that weren't spoken about before?
Yeah.
Right. So many podcasts that are speaking about like mental health, or speaking about emotional trauma and how it can affect your body and how it can shorten your lifespan, and all of these things that we hold on to. And those conversations 10, 20 years ago weren't really being talked about, or we didn't know about it, or stress being one of the number one reasons why people are dying nowadays. It's not even just because of physical disease, it's because of the psychological defects that we have over time.
Yeah. I think it's becoming more of like household conversations too. My co-founder, my business partner, Jason, he went to the barber shop today, and all the guys in the shop were asking him about depression and ADHD and, how do you combat depression and these thoughts? How do you pull yourself out of the rut? How do you keep yourself centered and grounded when your mind is running a mile a minute? And for him to go to a barbershop and have those I've never been to a barbershop because I'm a woman, but I imagine those are not the conversations people are having in there.
There's been
interesting.
Yeah, that play there. The gym usually talk about. I've been a part of. There was one gym session that I had where somebody I spoke to, and he's talking about his relationship, and he's just talking about like how hurt he is, and all these things. And I think men are just confiding more in men, and
Yeah.
not really
Valid. Totally valid.
yeah. I guess maybe that's where men are confiding more, not only just in men, but I feel like in general, and letting people know that this is where I'm at. So maybe that's another thing as well. But I've definitely been in some barbershops talks where they're over here talking about.
Interesting. I would love to be a fly on the wall. I want to know what men do behind closed doors when they're in their safe space,
Yeah, it's
I'm
not
a
just.
woman. I don't get that experience with men.
I've if they're watching this far, I have like my closest friends. We would high school, sometimes even now, like when I play video games with them, we would be on the party chat from like 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. and
That's when the good stuff happens.
just talking. Right, the game stops. We're
Yep.
just sitting here laying out, and we're just talking. We're not playing anything. We're just sitting here talking, and
Oh, I love that. How special.
yeah, it's I guess that's some people's form of therapy.
Yeah.
Where you're just not doing anything. You're talking to the boys, I guess, and
Yeah.
you're kind of deconstructing these things together.
I love it.
Yeah.
I would want to emphasize though that you're talking to the boys about the feels. Right? You're not just chit-chatting with the boys. That's not therapy.
Yeah, it's not all
That's
sports.
not an equivalent.
Yeah, it's not all guys talk about are in sports and other things. It's sometimes can be pretty impactful, and I guess that's where I've always wondered who, and I guess I'd love to know your perspective on this. Who do you think has long-lasting friendships? You think it's women, or do you think it's men?
Interesting. So I saw this comment, and it was a very angry man who commented on a post and said, "You're seeing more women die alone." And I love the comment section on Instagram. I don't know if you ever read the comments, they're unhinged. And this woman replied and she said, I'm a funeral director, and we actually see more men who die alone. Women have community around them. Women are surrounded by their friends. If their friends are still living, they're surrounded by family members. We see a lot more men who, if you die, you have to have someone sign off. And so sometimes that'll be a person appointed by the court. And whatever that term is, she was like, we see a lot more men with just those people. So I don't know. I think personally, men have more friends. I think women have deeper relationships.
I'd agree on that. I think that as well. I think that women are very from the outside looking in, that they are very good at creating that emotional connection and like deeper connection.
Yeah.
And us guys can be like, all right, what's up, bro? Like, we could just pass each other in the gym and can just kind of talk about, shoot the shit, I guess. But it seems that women are able to do a better job on getting more in tune with their emotions and explaining that to them and kind of like confiding in each other.
Yeah. I think we're more tapped into it from a younger age.
Yeah.
Because we have the space and the freedom to be. Right. Men are taught not to.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see though that how that dynamic plays out in years to come with all the mental health stuff and creating more safer of a space. I'm curious to see what life would be like, or what humanity would be like in like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating because you can't predict that, right? Any one event can change the total direction of something. And so who knows what people are going to be like 5 years, 10 years from now, but I hope it's better.
Yeah, I hope so too. What is something that you've been working on lately that you've been trying to overcome?
Good question. I think I'm really bad at boundaries with myself in terms of giving myself time and space to relax, right? And I know that's confusing because I'm a therapist and I should be doing that naturally. I don't. If you look at my calendar, you'd probably throw up. My assistant every day is like, how do you do this? When do you sleep? What do you do? And I just go, and I'm on autopilot, and I'm burnt out and I'm exhausted because of that. And so I'm focusing more on, how can I accomplish all of these goals? And it's a big year for me. I'm writing a book. I just started a podcast, right? Like I'm getting more into public speaking. So I see this as laying the foundation for the career and the future that I want for the rest of my life. So I went into 2025 knowing like, okay, this is a hustle year. I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to grind. And I will do that. But I also need to figure out how to stop and how to like take breaks. One thing that I did is I committed to Monday and Friday, 10:30 a.m. I go to yoga every Monday and Friday. It's non-negotiable. Sometimes I cancel Fridays, but Monday is non-negotiable. And that forces me to get up, get myself together, take some time and space, and have a slower start to my week, which then allows me to be more productive and sustainable throughout the week.
What I'm very interested. I'm trying to get into yoga.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. I
I
want to
do
get into
hot
hot
yoga.
yoga. Yes, that's what I want to get into.
I'm not going to name the studio now because people are going to come find me at the yoga studio, but I'll tell you after
Yeah.
this. And literally the first class that I ever went to, I don't like core power. Core power is not my thing. It's too intense.
Mhm.
And I lifted with you. You know, I like lifting, you know, I like being intense, but I don't like core power and things like that. I want to hit the meditation stage. I want to be a little bit more zen. And then I want to push through the flow when the time comes. But I want to feel what is my body capable of. And then I also want to take space for myself at the same time. And the first class I ever went to, she had said, you know, if you came here just to have a hot nap, enjoy your nap. I'll see you on the other side. And I loved that because that created the culture that we needed within the room to like take it easy on ourselves if we really needed to.
Mhm.
Versus you go to a place like Core Power and like push, 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 go harder. That's not what your body needs all the time.
Mhm.
Sometimes your body just needs to sweat and rest.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm definitely. It's hilarious that you say it because last night I was literally looking up like what places are good, and
So good.
I'm scared because I don't want to do it by myself. Like if I'm going there by myself, like I don't know.
Why?
Well, because I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like in that space I'd be the only guy in there.
Oh no. Oh no. I actually the guy I'm dating calls him my yoga husband. Because we're always in the back row. I go to the same mat. I book like 4 weeks in advance because I want the same mat in the corner every week.
Yeah.
And 2 mats over, there's this guy and he has this wedding ring on. And we like now we're on the hey basis. You know, when
Yeah.
you're at the gym and you like get on the head nod basis, that's a big step. That's like basically marriage in the workout world or the exercise world. And it's funny because there's so many men.
Yeah.
So many men at the studio that I go to.
Definitely gonna have to. I'll have to find out the time that you're going, and I'll definitely have to go and
So fun.
experience that.
I also get to bring a guest, so.
Oh, okay. Listen, that
Slay.
this seems like it's fitting, or I guess destiny for me to go. Where, what do you? I wanna have like a love question in here. What do you believe that relationships are going to deter over time as a whole, or do you believe that they're gonna start improving?
I think they're going to start improving, to be honest. Well, I don't know. Maybe existing relationships might fall apart, but not all of them by any means. I don't think it will be anything like we saw in our parents' generation. Um, I think they're going to improve for all of the new relationships that are coming up. I think a lot more people are single in today's day and age, and not because they don't want to date, but because their standards are higher. And I think that's strengthening relationships.
Do you think that creates a lonely society? Do you think that we've been more lonely than ever now?
Yes and no. I think it depends on where you are, to be quite honest. I think in New York City, we don't see that as much because there's so much to do and we're surrounded by people and by things every day. I think maybe in suburban life, people are still getting married a bit earlier because they do want that companionship and they want someone to spend life with. Um, it depends, I think, where you are. I also think it pushes us more into community. And I think with recent events, people really lean on community. I think there's just with the pandemic, right? We were all forced to sit and just be with our thoughts for better or for worse. And there's a lot of things happening within communities that are bringing people together more and more. And so I think there's more of an emphasis on community than romantic relationships.
Interesting. I guess I saw a clip on this one podcast where Chris Williamson was interviewing this guy, and he said, what do you wish that men understood about women, or what do you wish that women understood about men? And I would like to know on the adverse, what do you wish that men knew about women?
Interesting. I think there's two things. I think I want men to know that women are not trying to control you. Sometimes we just need something from you and don't really know how to get that. And then I think a lot of women just want honesty, right? Women, we are so confined to a biological clock. And I think a lot of men don't, well, my experience personally, and from a lot of friends and people I've talked to, men don't consider that and don't respect that. And it's not because they're actively trying not to, it's just not something men think about. And so I want men to think about that when they're dating, especially when they're in their 20s or 30s, and just be honest with women, right? Communicate how you feel, communicate where you're at, communicate if there's a shift in how you're feeling or where you're at in the relationship. Don't just stay in those relationships when a woman is nearing 30s or mid 30s because you think it might be good, right? The woman doesn't get to make that choice.
Mm-hmm. You think that that's where we fall short as men?
I think for older men, yeah. I think for men in their 30s, I say older men, I mean like our generation older men, right? I do. I think a lot of men don't consider any of that. And I've had those conversations with my ex, and granted, I was only in that relationship for a year, thank goodness, but he did say like, I wasn't considering that timeline, and we talked about a timeline and we agreed to it, and then he pushed it back without telling me. And so now going into dating again, like I'm very transparent and I'm very communicative from the start because I am 29. Like I wanted to be a younger mom. I envisioned myself having kids at 31, 32. And maybe that won't happen now. Maybe it'll be later. And I won't say that's fine because it's not. That wasn't what I wanted for myself. And I think had men in my life been more honest and open with me, that maybe I could have gotten closer to that goal.
Something I do want to ask, or I do want to get to know, is that I've been seeing a lot of like people that have kids together, they don't end up staying together, and I'm curious to know why that might be. Why, when as soon as the kids are involved, why is the relationship departing? Like why is the relationship breaking down as soon as you have kids? But they're not even married as well.
Yeah.
Like Corday and the tennis player, I forgot her name. I can't think of her name right now, but they just recently broke up and they had a kid. Wouldn't you think that we're just kind of in this cycle of like we're just having kids and then we're just leaving and then we're just showing, the kid that this is what it looks like? I've always been curious about that aspect, is that why do, when people have kids, the relationship is coming to a close?
In general, the relationship gets harder with kids, right? Kids literally push you to your limits and then some. And you're not sleeping. You're maybe not eating full meals because you're so busy. And you're just in brain fog and on autopilot 24/7. And I contracted through a company. I worked as a guest expert with Paired. Paired started as this app that would help couples just improve their relationships. And their entire audience over the years has shifted. And now they're catering towards young couples with kids because that's the demographic that they've noticed needs the most support. Because your relationship changes, right? You meet someone and you're dating them and it's great. And then maybe you get married, maybe you don't, but your relationship is you two. That's your relationship. Now there's a child involved. You guys are gone. And it's not that you don't exist anymore, but there's an entirely different dynamic in your relationship. And I think that's where it starts to break down because people stop choosing each other in those moments. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, though, that you bring up celebrities because I've never thought about this before, but I think celebrities are very much like 10 years behind. I feel like when we were growing up, it was very common for celebrities to just like start dating someone, get married after a year, have kids, maybe not get married, have kids. And a lot of people were doing that too who weren't celebrities. And I think less people are doing that now. But I still see it really often in like the famous world, the celeb world.
Yeah, it's always weird because it's like, aren't we just reinforcing that idea that we're just gonna instill broken homes into society? Like we already have enough of those.
Yeah.
But now we're just since we see them. Yeah, we could use less. We could use less.
Like, if you're gonna be a single parent, just be healthy. Like,
yeah.
Can we just like communicate and learn emotional regulation skills and things like that? But Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought about that, how that dynamic has shifted.
Yeah, I mean, trauma is a good thing because it's like I feel like it's a very good character builder for
Put it
sure.
on your tombstone. Trauma's a good
Yeah,
thing.
trauma's a good thing. I mean, I guess I have the growth mindset in that aspect where I think it's a good thing because it's opportunity for growth. It's opportunity for you to look at yourself and how can you grow in this, or what are you going to extract out of life that is from this. And I know not everybody has the growth mindset, but for the people that listen that might have the growth mindset, they might understand on where I'm coming from. But I do think it's good. Like I think I understand, different atrocities can happen in life and different things can happen in life. But I think that trauma is a good understanding of not only yourself but the world around you and how you interact with the world.
I agree. And I actually think about this often because I want to raise like a really healthy and secure family. And then I think like, where are they going to get their grit?
Yeah.
Like I'm the powerhouse that I am. And I'm going to not humbly brag for a second. I'm a force to be reckoned with in my personal and professional life. And it's because I got there, right? I pushed myself there. I grew up in the suburbs in New Jersey with no connections, no money. Everything I have is because I built that. But I built it because I was traumatized, right? I built it because I had that fire underneath me to prove something, to make something of myself. What if I raise healthy kids and they're just like, I'm good. I'm happy.
Yeah, I don't know. A little bit of hardship doesn't hurt nobody,
No,
Like
it doesn't.
I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. Where would something like that exist if you live in a healthy household?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't even know what that looks like.
Maybe outside experience, like maybe bullying or something like that,
Yeah.
or like,
I can see kids in a healthy household being bullied in school because they're healthy and like talk
ooh,
about their feelings. I can so see that happening.
Sally made fun of you, but then you don't respond to Sally because you know how to regulate yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I don't know. That's a good point. But I do think that we do see a lot of successful people that are bounded by either trauma or insecurity, and they stay in that traumatic or insecure mindset and don't end up growing out. But I think it's a great thing that you've been able to um, have that force to be reckoned with, but also understand and be compassionate towards yourself and like show yourself love. And I don't think a lot of people can be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a different mindset. I think a lot of people sit in that these things happen to me
Hmm.
mindset. And yeah, my trauma happened to me. I didn't ask for any of it by any means, but I'm also not going to sit there and say, woe is me. There's a time and a place for that. And I did that. And I still feel the feels when it comes up or when trauma is triggered. But ultimately, like, I got to pick myself up by the bootstraps and move on because I'm not going to get anything in life that I want if I don't. I can't sit and talk about my feelings 24/7 because if I do, I'm not going to get anywhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. There's gonna be no progress. Where have you fallen short in relationships and love?
Hmm. I think I try to control a lot. I
Mm.
think a lot of it's connected to the timeline and the biological clock. So I think some of it is not necessarily because of me and because of not working on myself. Um, but I'm very rigid, right? And that's a trauma response in itself. I need things the way that I need them, and I need them done the way that I need them done. And I rely on that for stability. And I think it connects back to what I'm working on most right now is trying to pause and take time so that I have capacity, right? It's like I need my apartment to look the way that it looks for my own regulation daily. If it doesn't, I'm a mess. And any disruption in my routine throws me off completely because I don't have time. I literally don't have time built into my day to deal with something that goes off track. So I think I try to control things a lot, and I think by learning to slow down and take a step back, that's going to create more space in my relationships for my partner to be them.
Yeah. The controlling aspect. Yeah. Hmm. I do want you to speak a little bit about your podcast because it did just come out, and I want to know, what do you envision, what do you hope, or what do you want to gain out of this podcast that you've created?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Safe Space. It'll come up as Safe Space with Laura if you look that up. Um, it is an evolution of everything that I've done on social media in the past 2 years. So I started the account October 2022, and I would go get coffee every morning, and I was like, I want to answer questions about dating and relationships, right? I was a new therapist. I was new to the field. I didn't really know what I was doing half the time. And I loved answering questions every week because it helped me think about things in a different way. And it helped me apply everything that I learned as a therapist to real life scenarios. So I would put the anonymous link up every Wednesday, and then I would answer anonymous questions Thursday mornings, and I called it Coffee Cues. And I say this in my first episode, but some of my fondest memories are answering those questions in the most insane places because I loved doing it that much. I took a solo trip October 2022 to Norway, and I remember sitting out in a cabin overlooking a fjord answering those questions. And I'll never forget those moments, right? So over the years, Coffee Cues would go on and off. When I had capacity for it, I would do it. When I didn't, I would take a break from it. And then last year I started, or 2 years ago when I met you, I started Emotionally Available, which was an advice column. And I liked it. I didn't love it. And I'm a writer. I really thought that I would love it. And I didn't. Now, years later, we have Safe Space. And so Safe Space is this idea that people have a place to be vulnerable, right? People have a place to answer questions that maybe they're too afraid to ask. And I love the anonymous format because I notice, if I post a question box from Instagram, it's not anonymous. People won't ask as many questions, or the questions aren't as deep. Versus if I post the anonymous question link, they are so deep, sometimes a little unhinged, for better or for worse. But people really want answers, and they don't have those spaces. And so I built it with the idea that I want to create that safe space, but also because as a kid, I didn't have people to ask, right? I didn't have relationship models. I didn't have people who knew what it was like to talk about feelings or to be emotionally intelligent or aware even. And this is the space for people who lack those models.
I love that. I think I'm in the channel, so I've been listening, and I'll definitely be following that journey. I'm excited to see where that journey is going to take you as well. And I think it's going to do wonders for a lot of people because you answer questions or you talk about things that most people won't talk about, which is something that I try to do with this podcast. And I definitely respect that for sure.
Likewise, this is such a needed space.
Yeah. Last question that I have for you is, I've been doing this a lot with my guests, but I've want to be able to know if you saw yourself, you brought up like 2022 a lot, how that such was like a transformative year for you. If you were on the other side and I'm Laura from that year, what is something that you would want to tell her?
Oh my goodness. You have everything that you need. You have everything that you need, and you're right where you're meant to be. We try to push ourselves to this idea or this vision that we have for ourselves, but sometimes that's not where we're supposed to be. And it doesn't mean that we won't ever get there, but it does mean that maybe it's not your time or your place to be now. And I had so much to learn in that season of life. And I thought I was so intelligent. I thought I was so mature, right? But we look back and we grow through the experiences that we have. And it's not that I wasn't intelligent or I wasn't mature, but that was the stage of life that I was in. So I think I would say to her, keep going. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do, and it will all make sense someday.
I love that. I just want to say thank you again for coming on for a part 2, despite the inconsistencies with the equipment.
Thanks for having me.
I definitely want to do a part 3 in the future, and I'm curious to see how that book is going to be doing and where you are going to be at that point in your life. But I just want to say thank you for coming on today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on again.
Thanks for having me. It feels really full circle.
Yeah, right. To everybody listening, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for showing support, and thank you guys for showing love. This is the 1% Podcast. I'm out.